Please welcome to the stage Women's Bureau Director, Dr. Lori Todd Smith.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to the United States Department of Labor, and thank you for joining us this morning for the National Summit on Women in Apprenticeship. I'm looking forward to a great discussion on how we can encourage more women to participate and advance in workforce through apprenticeship programs. My name is Lori Todd Smith, and I am proud to serve as the new director of the Women's Bureau, and I think that's the first time I got to say that. I've been on the job about 2 weeks. Thank you. A little over 2 weeks, and I am proud to be in this new role. I have a lot to learn, but I'm thrilled to be in this new position. In my previous role, I served as Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Phil Bryant in Mississippi and Executive Director of the State Workforce Investment Board. I have had several successful experiences in working with employers in my former capacity in Mississippi, so I'm excited to bring my passion about helping working families as well as my experience with Department of Labor and have the opportunity to help all states. I want to start with a quick Mississippi success story, if you'll bear with me for a moment. I think it's quite fitting for our discussion today. Ingalls Industry, since 1866, has built more ships than any other United States military shipbuilder. As Governor Bryant often says, in Mississippi, we build ships, we build warships. So Ingalls employs more than 41,000 workers. They spend a lot of time and effort recruiting and retaining the workforce. One of their programs is focused specifically on recruiting women into shipbuilding careers. Ingalls created a partnership with Pascagoula High School in the coast of Mississippi, Moore Community House, the Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, and Department of Labor. Moore Community House created a training curriculum entitled Women in Construction that helps prepare and train women for high-paying jobs. It's an entry-level role that transitions young women into regular apprenticeship positions at Ingalls. I believe some of the staff from Moore Community House might be here today. Ann McWilliams, are you here? There she is, thank you. Another Mississippian here. Glad you're here, so thank you for your work. But since what I learned also about the program, since the first class in 2008, the Women in Construction curriculum has trained more than 400 women, and many of them are now working at Ingalls Industries. So I'm looking forward to taking some of these successes we had in Mississippi and developing policies and programs that will help advance women in the workplace, which is actually the mission of the Women's Bureau. So the Women's Bureau, by way of background, is the only federal agency that's tasked with focusing exclusively on working women by safeguarding their interests, advocating for equality and economic security, as well as promoting quality work environments. Our work began 100 years ago as the Women's Bureau was established on June 5th of 1920, just 2 months before the 19th Amendment was ratified, officially granting women the right to vote. Since the inception of the Women's Bureau, we have helped convene discussions that have led to the passage of very substantial legislation, such as the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Equal Pay Act, Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, and Pregnancy Discrimination Act, to name a few. The work of the Women's Bureau today is really addressing more modern workforce topics. We are working on exploring, obviously, more women into apprenticeships, as you're all here today to learn more about that. We're also working on advancing the President's support of parental paid leave, helping increase working families' access to affordable and quality childcare, expanding opportunities for military spouses, 92% of which are women, by reducing occupational licensing barriers for women. And we're also working on growing opportunities for women in entrepreneurship. But today's summit is all about exploring ways to help advance and expand apprenticeship programs. I want to be sure you've all heard the most recent workforce numbers, job numbers. More than 5.7 million jobs have been created in the United States since January 2017. As of August 30th, 2019, there were approximately 7.14 1.4 million job openings. The women's unemployment rate is at a historic low, 3.2%, and the labor force participation rate for adult women remains strong at nearly 60%. It's clear the nation would not be experiencing the successes of today without women's participation in our economy. With this thriving economy and increased job creation, we're really at a unique moment in time, a moment of significant opportunity for all American workers, especially women, which brings us to today. To celebrate National Apprenticeship Week, the Women's Bureau wants to work with you today to encourage ways for more women to consider entering the workforce through apprenticeship programs. To get today's conversation started and kick things off, I would like to welcome to the podium the United States Department of Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia. Secretary Scalia.
Welcome to all of you to the Department of Labor. Thanks for joining us today. And also want to welcome Lori Todd Smith, who, as you heard, started here just last week. I welcome you as a veteran myself, having been here, I think, nearly 6 full weeks. But Lori, it's great to have you. You're off to a terrific start, as reflected in this event today and other things that you've already launched. This week, of course, is National Apprenticeship Week, in which we celebrate and highlight what apprenticeships can offer workers and what they can offer the American workplace and the economy. This group knows as well as anyone the benefits that apprenticeships can offer. Employer engagement, education, and training in jobs that they need and are anxious to have filled. A credential that can be used by workers with that employer or employers nationwide to help them gain employment. An employment rate for those that complete their apprenticeship of around 94% in really good paying jobs. I think apprenticeship jobs for people who graduate are around $70,000 a year, so a very good working wage. You know, and Lori touched on this briefly, we're in an extraordinary period in the American economy right now with historically low unemployment rates. The unemployment rate we're looking at right now is just about the lowest since the early 1950s. We're experiencing unemployment rate for some populations that are the lowest that have ever been recorded for African Americans, for Hispanic Americans, for Americans with disabilities. The unemployment rates that we're experiencing right now are the lowest since we started keeping the numbers. And as Lori touched on, for adult women, the lowest in more than 60 years. This is obviously terrific news. It results in substantial part from reforms this president has made to reduce taxes and reduce regulatory burdens. But this great news comes with a challenge that a lot of you are aware of, which is the so-called job gap or skills gap, where we've got, and again, Lori touched on it, we've got more than 7 million unfilled jobs right now. And even if we filled all those jobs with a 5.8 or so million Americans looking for work, we'd still have about 1 million unfilled jobs. So it is just critical right now to continue this extraordinary economic environment we're experiencing by, among other things, enhancing the skills and abilities of people who are out there in the workforce so they can step into some of these jobs that we have open and that in many cases offer terrific opportunities for them. It's for that reason that apprenticeships have been a focus of the president, the White House, this administration, and this department here. The president in June 2017 signed an executive order on expanding apprenticeships in America, in which he set forth a number of tasks for us to tackle and established a task force on apprenticeship expansion, which in turn identified a number of avenues in order to expand apprenticeships, make them more available, and to just make them more familiar to American workers and American employers. Over the last year, the department here has announced numerous substantial grant opportunities in the area of apprenticeships for many millions of dollars, offering these to employers, educational institutions, labor unions, and other associations and partnerships that can help establish more apprenticeships. Since the start of 2017, we've seen more than 600,000 people enter apprenticeships, and these numbers continue to grow. In all of these efforts, as this group knows, a primary emphasis has been expanding apprenticeships into new areas, into occupations where they've not been as prevalent, and introducing people who in the past historically have not entered apprenticeships, introducing them to apprenticeships, helping them understand that this can be a really unique way forward in today's economy. In many cases, of course, expanding apprenticeship opportunities and awareness of apprenticeships has included helping women enter apprenticeships more frequently. Some of the occupations where apprenticeships historically have been most common are occupations where women have not worked as much as in other areas. And some of the industries to which we'd like to see apprenticeships expanded are industries where women historically have often been an important part of that workforce. So, and this is something for you all to be discussing today, obviously, but we're interested here in the department, both in expanding opportunities for women in areas that historically have had apprenticeships but have not had a large number of women workers, but also seeing apprenticeships move into areas like high tech and elsewhere where they've not been common in the past. This summit today is an opportunity for all of you to have a thoughtful conversation on how we can build awareness about the opportunities apprenticeships present to women, and to discuss promising practices to encourage more women to consider and choose apprenticeships. And there's really no better organization to foster this dialogue than the Women's Bureau, which, as Lori said, is approaching its 100th anniversary. And this event is a really great example of how the Women's Bureau can use the position that it has in the community, the resources and leadership that it's exhibited, to work together with other agencies within the department to promote priorities that we have as a department, as an administration, and most importantly, that Americans, workers, and businesses have together with one another. So again, thank you for coming. I hope this is a terrific session for all of you, and really most importantly, thank you for what you've already done to help women in the workplace, to help expand apprenticeships, and I hope that more of the same results from your conversations today. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. One of the guiding principles I mentioned already about the Women's Bureau is to identify and amplify apprenticeship best practices in apprenticeships. So all indicators demonstrate more and more women are poised to take inroads for the first time into industries and occupations where they have historically been underrepresented. For these reasons, we're pleased to have you here today to participate in our summit. I'm a former classroom teacher, so I think it's always good to start with your objectives as we begin a summit. So your objectives for the day, what we hope you take away from today. We want to provide a forum to learn from experts who have demonstrated a commitment to expanding opportunities for women to succeed in apprenticeships. We want to highlight some of the defining characteristics of apprenticeship models with promise for recruiting and retaining women. We want to discuss challenges for women who are trying to enter into apprentices and strategies of how to resolve those challenges. And we also want to foster dialogue among stakeholders who aren't usually all in the same room together. So we'll do this by having a 30-minute informal networking at the end of the event here in the Great Hall. But first, we're going to hear from Susan Crystal Mansoor, who is president of the Program Impact of the National Restaurant Association Education Foundation. Following our keynote address, we'll hear from the United States Department of Labor Deputy Secretary Patrick Pizzella. And we will continue the conversation with a very distinguished panel of experts that will share their innovative practices and highlight the successful models that can be replicated across a variety of settings. Following the panel, we're going to break into small groups and brainstorm ideas on increasing women's participation in apprenticeship programs. So for those of you that are watching online, we hope that you'll join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag NAW2019. Again, I'm very excited to see you all here today and look forward to the discussion. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Susan Crystal Mansoor, Vice President of Program Impact of the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation. Dr. Crystal Mansoor oversees the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation's programs, which includes launching the first ever restaurant manager apprenticeship program for the United States Department of Labor. Dr. Crystal Mansoor is also a graduate of Tufts University and received her PhD in physiological psychology from the University of Washington. She also serves on the Education, Employment, and Training Committee of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Talent Pipeline Management Advisory Committee at the United States Chamber of Commerce Foundation. She's also served on grant review panels for the American Society of Association Executives. Please welcome our keynote speaker to the stage, Dr. Susan Crystal Mansoor.
Good morning, and thank you. I am Sue Crystal Mansoor, and I'm the Vice President of Program Impact for the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation. That's a lot of words that just tumbled out of my mouth, and if I keep repeating them all day, I'll run out of my time before we get to anything. So I'm Sue, and I'll refer to the organization as NRAEF or the Foundation. I'm incredibly honored to serve as the keynote and really kick off the conversations and the questions, which will hopefully fuel really useful discussions of today. A huge thank you to the Department of Labor for inviting NRAEF to be part of this important day. As noted, with the support of the Department of Labor and in partnership with the American Hotel and Lodging Association, we established the first ever competency-based hospitality manager apprenticeship program. The program has defined the pathway to success for restaurant and lodging careers. The goals of, as an intermediary organization, I should say, we customize the support to help implement the registered apprenticeship program to meet the needs of each employers, with the ultimate goal, of which there are three, next slide please, of expanding the pipeline of qualified and capable restaurant and hospitality managers, upskilling workers to the national industry standards, addressing the barriers to apprenticeship, and retaining quality employees long-term in operations. Next slide. And I should say, we are proud to say that in our third year, we have been wildly successful. To date, we have over 2,000 registered apprentices. Our retention rate in the program is 90%, and the average wage increase we see across the entirety of the program is 14%. But we're not here today just to talk about apprenticeship programs. We're really here today to talk about women in apprenticeship. And a few weeks ago, I was sitting in this room and I was thinking about this wonderful opportunity, the summit and the discussion, and what it was that we needed to talk about. And as I looked around the room, the first thing that I noticed was all the portraits of the secretaries of the Department of Labor along the wall. And at first I looked to my right and your left and I saw men. And then as my eyes moved around the room and I crossed over the room, I saw the first woman secretary, and then followed by the second and the third and the fourth. And I really began to wonder, what was it that led that first woman to rise to that position? And did her presence then lead to the existence of others? What was it that allowed her to cross the room? On that same day, I had the pleasure of hearing Assistant Secretary Palish give a talk. And he said that he was really concerned with those people not in the count of the labor market, those not counted, those not up at the table, and those who hadn't crossed the room. And so this really began to solidify what I thought would be great starting points for the discussion today. Why is women in apprenticeships so important? How do we engage women to become part of that count, part of the leadership and the skilled workers? How do we cross from one side of the room to the other and count women in our ranks and enable women to see themselves in advancement and in leadership? The takeaway is to listen to all of us. The panel that comes after me has incredible learnings and experience and has really brought apprenticeship to where it is today and to enable its success. So now let me tell you about the women apprentices in our program. And I'm going to specifically start to focus on the women in the restaurant manager apprenticeship program. Now, before looking at the numbers overall, there's something to know about the restaurant industry. It's over 50% women. It's around the 52, 53% mark. And in establishing an apprenticeship program for a restaurant manager, we knew that we had to understand what the key factors were that interested women in engaging in apprenticeship, and whether they saw this as a pathway, because to establish this program and to have such a high percentage of women in our industry, they needed to engage at the level. It was essential for us to understand not only their engagement, but what would lead to their success and their completion of the program. So let me tell you where we are with our women today in restaurant managers. We are proud to say that over 55% of our restaurant manager apprentices are women. Their retention rate is 90%, and their median wage increase over the course of apprenticeship is 55%. So how were we so successful? I could say apprenticeship program in a non-traditional industry that had a large representation of women allowed us to engage more women. I could say that apprenticeship in and of itself creates an environment to support the mentoring towards and skill building of an individual and of women. And I could say that apprenticeship in and of itself provides employers with tools and resources and trainings to create environments in which women thrive. But I will say, next slide, that the true success of our apprenticeship program is built upon the foundations of the speakers who will be on the panel after me. Leaders in Women in Apprenticeship by CVS Health, Minuteman Technical Institute, Tectonic, Chicago Women in Trades, and the support and initiative and leadership of the Department of Labor, who has implemented programs and provided knowledge and learning to address the barriers to apprenticeship for women entering into the program, as well as staying in the program. So what are the three keys to success for apprenticeship? What does apprenticeship create that allow women to thrive so well? Next slide. We see three key factors. Apprenticeship demonstrates the employer's commitment to investing in their employees' training and advancement. They're able to articulate the pathway forward and support individuals as they move forward. Apprenticeship, secondly, addresses barriers to work. And thirdly, apprenticeships help current leaders support future leaders and encourages mentorship. And this then leads to the fourth key point about why apprenticeship has been so successful for women in our industry. more women in leadership roles become mentors for the next generation of women apprentices. They enable people to cross the room, to be part of the count, and to rise. Now, you may say, oh, we're done with the talk. She came up with her 3 things, all good? No. I want to dive into this just a little. Because while we can see these as 3 key factors, when you implement them in an apprenticeship program, you need to see in your industry what the current state of that is, whether that is important to women, and how those factors impact women in the industry. So I'm going to dive into each of these factors and talk about the state of our foundation and what we do and how apprenticeship fit that model, talk about our industry overall, and how these 3 factors really lead into the advancement of women. So first, let's talk about this importance of the employer being able to articulate the pathway forward, advance women, and support them as they move forward. As the philanthropic foundation of the National Restaurant Association, our mission of service to the public is dedicated to enhancing the industry's training and education, career development, and community engagement efforts. The NRAEF and its programs work to attract, empower, and advance today's and tomorrow's restaurant and food service leaders. Next slide. As a foundation, we serve a number of different audiences to help them advance towards success in rewarding careers in the restaurant industry. This includes a 2-year high school career and technical education program on restaurant management and culinary called Prostart, a ready-to-work program, Restaurant Ready, apprenticeship that we're talking about today, our military programs, which serve current uniform-wearing, transitioning veterans, and military spouses, and our scholarship program. Many of our programs boast over 50% participation by women. Our high school program, which is in over 1,800 schools, all 50 U.S. states and U.S. territories, and touches about 150,000 students a year, is about 60% female. Scholarships, we award around $850,000 in scholarships, and in this last year, those awards, 70% of them were made to women, and they're for post-secondary education support. So that's our foundation and who we serve. What about our industry? On this slide, you see 2 sets of data. What is on the left side is data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And on the right is data from research that we did about 2 years ago on the next generation, 16 to 29-year-olds, your Gen Z and your millennials, either in the industry currently or having had a job in the industry recently. And what you're seeing is the percentage of women in 3 different positions in our industry: wait staff, managers, and owners. In the industry overall, wait staff is 70% female. The managers, 47% female, and the owners, 39% female. In our next generation, we see the similar trend. The wait staff is 54% female, managers were 33%, and owners 34%. But this is looking across in the row of that position. What happens when we look at women overall and down? If we look at women across the entire industry, we see that from the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, that in entry-level positions, women occupy about 53% of the women in the industry occupy entry level. They occupy about 37% of the management positions and 20% of the owner positions. Looking to that next generation, that Gen Z and the millennials, the wait staff, we see about 33% of the women who are currently in or recently in to have been wait staff, 12% at managers, and 10% at owners. So one could say the trend is going in that direction. However, I will tell you at the manager and the owner level for our Gen Z and our millennials, that percentage is significantly smaller in women than in men. So women are progressing in our industry. We see them at high levels in management overall, but their progression rate, it may suggest, is different or might be slower. So we also then, you might counter that and say, well, do women want to be managers? And do they want to be owners? And we ask that question. And they do at comparable levels to their male counterparts. The next generation, the Gen Z and millennials, want to fill those managerial and those ownership positions. So then we look at, well, what is it that women need in a work environment? What are they seeking, and what will retain them within that? And this research on Gen Z and millennials gave us 3 good starting points. First, women believe that the restaurant job is a good first job to have and a good job to have overall. So their belief was in our industry. The second was what women look for in employment. In employment settings, they're looking at recognition and reward, good management, and training and investment by employers. And then we ask the questions, what would be a driving factor to have them stay within their current job? And the 2 top driving factors were compensation and good management. So taken all together, this speaks to that first point about the power of apprenticeship in women. Our women want to move up. They're looking for environments with recognition, reward, training, and good management. And that first point that we talked about apprenticeship, empowering employers to articulate the pathway forward, that is their responsibility to train and advance these individuals, really meets that. Next slide. Apprenticeship can be wildly successful because it provides the framework and the resources to enable employers to meet women where they are and move them along, to help them invest in women, to move them up along the career pathway. Next slide. So that's fine in theory, but how does it work in practice? And this is Odette. She was one of our first apprentices in the program. And Odette is a general manager at Shakey's Pizza USA in Anaheim, California. And Odette had worked in several different pizza restaurants, and then she saw more benefit in coming over to Shakey's to take advantage of the opportunity to progress, to be trained more quickly, and through an articulated pathway. Once she joined Shakey's and became part of the apprenticeship program, she was learning, while working, the fundamentals of human resources, marketing, and finance, along with other key competencies along that pathway, simultaneously taking on increasing responsibilities and being able to apply the learnings into her work setting. We called her when we knew that we would be up here and presenting the program and giving the talk, and we asked her about apprenticeship program. And she said, the program just boosted my confidence. In some areas I wasn't really sure about when running a store. It clarified things and made me believe in myself. This is the power of apprenticeship program in women. She moved over to a place that could support and articulate her growth forward, that provided her with the specific training that was then applied while she was working, giving her the confidence and allowing her to succeed. So let's move to the second key factor that we talk about, and that is to address the barriers. Apprenticeship, within its framework, addresses the barriers to work. And we just talked about the incredible work of the Department of Labor's Women's Bureau, which has this mission to facilitate environments and establish policies that enable women to succeed in careers. They seek to reduce barriers that inhibit access and might suppress retention. The apprenticeship, our apprenticeship program, with the support of the Department of Labor, enacts regulations to diversify the apprenticeship. We were able to place it in a non-traditional industry, which had a large percentage of women. It guides training and education by the employer. It provides funding to address barriers to work and training, and it articulates growth. What are the barriers to work for women? Well, we know that women report in the workforce that they are still responsible for a large majority of the family care, whether it's children or aging parents. It's a barrier to work, and it's a barrier to advancement. The incentive funding that we were able to provide to our employers in our apprenticeship program allowed them to support the apprentices for things such as the cost of training, transportation, and childcare. This does two things. One is it acknowledges that, in fact, these are barriers to advancement and retention in the workforce. And the other is it addresses those barriers. And that's what the apprenticeship program has enabled to do. The apprenticeship program has provided trainings to employers, such as unconscious bias, which changes the environment for women in the workforce. Barriers to advancement. Do you see me? Do you consider me one to be selected to be part of this program? Thereby, again, creating environments in which women can thrive. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the third factor. Apprenticeship within its framework creates mentorship. Why is mentorship so important? Going back to that research that we did on the next generation, we asked them the importance of mentors. We asked the women, what would you want a mentor to do for you? Why do you want a mentor? Top two reasons that women seek mentors is to build skills, to get them a better job, or to advance them within a job. And the second is to build confidence. Think back to Odette. It built my confidence. So what's the reality of mentorship for women? Going back to that same survey, only 20% of the women in that survey reported currently having a mentor. This is significantly lower than the men who were surveyed as well. 47% of the women in that survey reported never having a mentor, and that is significantly higher than their male counterparts. Apprenticeship requires mentorship and investment for the reasons that women seek mentors: to build skills and to build confidence. Next slide. So what is apprenticeship doing for women? Why is it that it's so successful? Why should we keep broadening it out to every industry? We've discussed that it creates this framework which allows women to thrive. It articulates the pathway of growth. It provides employers with resources to help individuals along that pathway. It addresses barriers to engagement towards advancement and to achieving advancement. and it builds mentors in and creates the next generation of mentors. But I would also say that apprenticeship changes the conversation for women. No longer are women fighting their way to the top. They're being supported, led, and mentored along a pathway towards advancement in their industry. And we certainly have seen this within our own restaurant manager registered apprenticeship program. Now, I've talked a lot, and I've put it out in theory. But what we're going to show you next is from our apprentice, the power of apprenticeship for women.
My mom was from Mexico. She came to the United States when she was young, and she became a single mom of 5. She would always work hard, and I feel like she gave me part of those habits of once you go to a job, stick with it, work hard. So I feel like that's what made me just move up so fast. So I was working at another pizza place. I was a manager, but I didn't really see myself growing. So Shakey's came along, and that's when I felt like, hey, they have way more opportunities. And here I am, just within a few years, having my own restaurant at the apprenticeship program. There was a variety of classes that I really enjoyed. So marketing was really neat, the fact that you kind of were aware of your surroundings, also how to get more customers to come to your store. So I feel like it made me more confident, more well-rounded, a better GM for my store. Also, I learned good customer service for the whole store. This is just to make sure the team have a great attitude. When everyone's happy, the customers feel happy being there. I just like socializing with the guests. So I talk to the kids. I usually give them a token or two so they could play around. So I feel like just decided to go eat at Shakey's. Because of my promotion here at Shakey's, I got a new Prius. I'm also buying a vacation home in Big Bear. My mom, she's always very proud of me to a point that she tells me to stop working so much. I feel like she feels like you do a lot, but I tell her I saw you when I was young and I feel like you're doing great right now and I want to be the person that you are.
That is the power of apprenticeship. That is the base of our discussion today. We need to listen to the learnings of the panels that come after me, see how they've arrived at where they were. We need to thank the Department of Labor for creating this opportunity to bring apprenticeship to the hospitality industry, which opened the door for so many women to address the barriers for their engagement and for their advancement. As we keep broadening out apprenticeship to other industries and look within those industries, the responsibilities to how women engage within our industry. How do they become attracted to positions? What is it? Where do they see themselves? What is their current experience in climbing up along the pathway of career advancement and skill obtainment? What are the barriers? How do we build programs around that and equip the employers to meet them where they are and move them along? How do we get women to cross the room, to go from one side to the other, to be part of that count? Today is going to be an amazing day of learning, and I know that I'm going to walk away, and my organization's going to walk away with so many more things that we can be doing. So I thank you all for being here and knowledge sharing across that. I look forward to the discussions that will happen and forward to the panel that come after me. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful and helpful. Everyone, I hope, learned a lot from it. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Deputy Secretary Pizzella. He is no stranger to the Department of Labor, having previously served as Assistant Secretary of Labor for the Administration and Management from 2001 to 2009 during the George W. Bush administration. Before returning to the department, Deputy Secretary Pizzella served as the Senate-confirmed member of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, or FLRA. In January 2017, President Trump designated him as acting FLRA chairman, a position he held until December 2017. Deputy Secretary Pizzella also previously served as a member of the board of directors of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, having been designated for that position by President George W. Bush. We're incredibly fortunate to have him here today at the Labor Department with us, and I'd like to welcome to the stage Deputy Secretary Patrick Pizzella.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's nice and warm in here, isn't it? Compared to how it was this morning when some of us walked to work. Huh? He's laughing. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Todd Smith. As the newest member of our leadership team at the U.S. Department of Labor, I'd like to welcome Dr. Todd Smith as our new director of the Women's Bureau. I know that this is her first official event with us, and I think it's fair to say you have a great team working with you, and you're off to a great start. And we will not blame you for bringing this weather with you from Mississippi. I understand it's not like this in Mississippi. In July, I joined President Trump and several members of his cabinet at the White House to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the White House's pledge to America's workers. The Pledge to America's Workers was a call to action that started a national invitation for business and industry to create more and better jobs for Americans by providing education and skills for American students and workers. Today, more than 300 businesses have signed the pledge, large and small businesses, and pledging nearly 14 million commitments. But the pledge is more than just a commitment from these businesses. It is a reminder to all of us about the value in the dignity of work, which is a principle that is woven throughout the fabric of our country, the importance of the dignity of work. Work is more than a way to make a living. It's a form of participation in our nation's economy, an economy that must and should serve the people. And we're fortunate today, it's a growing economy, whereas somewhat, for those of you who remember, President Kennedy once said, a rising tide lifts all boats. And with the record levels of unemployment at all-time lows, and the record levels of unemployment for virtually every group you can think of in the country, every demographic, women, African Americans, people with disabilities. We are in very healthy economic times. Our economy's thriving, job creation continuing at a rapid pace, unemployment at historic lows. So there's a lot of opportunity out there for Americans who want to join the workforce. One of the things I find very noteworthy is that Americans with disabilities, their participation in the workforce has increased significantly in the last 2.5 years. Employers have found the value of people who weren't full participants before in the economy. They found the value that they can bring to the companies they run, and they found that in this age of technology, that there's a lot of assisted technology there where some people who may have not felt they could contribute can now find an avenue where they can contribute. So that is a promising new development in our employment situation in the country. As we celebrate National Apprenticeship Week, we are here to advance opportunities for America's workers by preparing our workforce to help companies fulfill these pledges they've made. Now, I'd like to tell you a story about one of America's founding fathers. Ben Franklin's name is associated with the $100 bill, wise old sayings, and death-defying stunts with kites. But many Americans probably don't realize how much they have in common with his early life. He was born into a lower middle-class family in urban Boston And Franklin wasn't expected to amount to much in his life. The Boston elite considered his lack of opportunities and credentials likely to prevent him from pursuing the career options available to the city's upper crust in that day. But like all of us, Franklin had dreams. The only question was how best to chase them. So as a youngster, Franklin enjoyed reading, but showed no aptitude towards math and other subjects. After a few tumultuous years of schooling back then, he decided that traditional education wasn't for him. He consulted his family and set off down a tried and true avenue towards a promising career. That avenue was apprenticeship. At a private publishing firm, Franklin, the apprentice, discovered hidden strengths. He gained confidence, he developed skills and experience, but most of all, he found his calling. Freshly armed with passion and know-how, Franklin started his own publishing firm in Philadelphia. Before long, he turned his love of reading and printing into a love of writing and began to self-produce many of his firm's publications. He developed a knack for turning a phrase and enjoyed amusing his readers with witty one-liners. One of them, no doubt, based in part on his experience as an apprentice. It's especially famous: early to bed, early to rise makes a man, well, healthy, wealthy, and wise. Something we probably all learn in grade school. Ben Franklin is one of America's most beloved founding fathers. He's known for many things, but it all started with an apprenticeship for him. Historians and peers alike have tirelessly debated whether Franklin's scientific or diplomatic, political, or inventive contributions most strongly impacted America. They can continue that debate for some time. However, gazing back across a lifetime of wide-ranging accomplishments, Franklin always considered himself, above all, a printer, the career he began as an apprentice. In one of his publications, Franklin said, quote, "Think of three things: whence you came, where you are going, and to whom you must account." Millions of Americans since Franklin's time would account their apprenticeship experience as the key turning point on the path between where they came from and where they're going. And if you're interested in joining the ranks, President Trump wants to know you're hired, according to TV stars. So, going back to our founding fathers, apprenticeships are part of the American culture. They have gone through hills and valleys during the course of our history as a country, but they have always been with us, and they are very much in vogue today, particularly these last few years, where we have an economy that is rapidly growing. We have more job openings than we have job seekers. We have companies outbidding other companies beyond the minimum wage in order to attract young people. And we have a lot of young people and their parents taking a second look at whether a commitment to a 4-year college education is worth the cost and time, as opposed to maybe the investment that a local firm or company is willing to offer to train someone with a skill so that at the end of the day, they don't have just a job. They have a trade that's portable, that can go with them if they move or relocate, or their spouse gets reassigned somewhere else in the country. So I leave you with that story. I wish you all a happy National Apprenticeship Week, and I encourage you to enjoy this summit. Thank you very much.
So, as a proud Pennsylvanian, I always love to hear stories about Ben Franklin. He certainly does personify the dignity of work, and not only in his style of apprenticeships, but also as an innovator. So it's really great to hear some of those stories and how that tradition is carried on throughout the history of our country. And I'd like to thank the Deputy Secretary, Pat Pizzella, for joining us today as part of our National Women in Apprenticeship Summit. My name is Erica Clayton-Wright, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Women's Bureau. And I have the distinct pleasure of kind of taking us into the next phase of the summit today, which is our real interactive phase with our panel. We will be talking about promising practices with a very distinct group of panelists that we have here today joining us, who have firsthand experiencing in the development, oversight, and management of apprentice programs for their organizations and departments. The goal of today's program is to discuss those promising practices, but let's really focus on those practices for women, because there are some unique differences in making apprenticeships appealing to women. And I think, as we heard earlier from our keynote speaker, the apprenticeships for women really build confidence and courage to be able to take that next step. And that is an incredible component of what really advances women in the workplace, which is an important piece of an apprenticeship program. I would like to make sure that this is an interactive session, and we will have questions and answers. So we're going to hold off on Q&A until the end of the panel. So if you have any questions, if you want to jot those down, we will have a Q&A at the end of the panel. So now I'd like to invite to our stage this distinct group of panelists. With us today, we have Tracy Britton, Manager of Workforce Initiatives with CVS Health, Dr. Nancy Huell, Executive Director of Minuteman Technical Institute, Chris Magyar, Chief Apprenticeship Officer with Tectonic, and Sierra Mitchell, Division Chief with our Office of U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Apprenticeship, and Lauren Sugarman, Director of Career and Women's Employment Equity at the Chicago Women's in Trade. So we have a really nice, diverse group of folks, public sector, private sector, education, and also government. And so thank you for joining me today. This is great. It's an honor to have you here, and it's an honor to be here with everybody today. I have asked each panelist to provide a brief introduction of themselves and tell us a little bit about their apprenticeship programs or involvement in the apprenticeship space before we start the conversation. So let's go ahead and just jump right in, and let's start with Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me okay? Okay, excellent. My name is Tracy Britton. I am a workforce manager for CVS Health, and I'm also the co-lead for our National Apprenticeship Program. We have 4 career tracks in our pharmacy technician, or in our organization, for pharmacy and for management, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail as the panel continues, or the summit continues.
Good morning. I'm Chris Magyar, and I'm Chief Apprenticeship Officer for Tectonic. Tectonic is an onshore software development company located in Boulder, Colorado. And what makes us unique is we've come up with a pioneering way to source, educate, and hire software developers through apprenticeship. So we've removed all the barriers for an individual to get into software development that have existed in the past. We received our DOL registered apprenticeship back in 2016, and in that time frame, we've had 125 apprentices join our program, and 31% of those apprentices have been women. So I look forward to telling you more about our apprenticeship as we go through the panel, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you to the Women's Bureau and to the Office of Apprenticeship for inviting us today and hosting the Women in Apprenticeship Summit. I began to be an advocate for women in apprenticeship almost exactly 40 years ago when I began my career as a helper in the elevator constructor occupation. Back then we didn't have an apprenticeship, so I was a helper and worked for 6 years for Westinghouse Elevator, fixing fixing and maintaining elevators. My favorite job was the Sears Tower because I got to be at the top of the world back then. And I helped to co-found Chicago Women in Trades in 1981 because, like most of us that were pioneers in the trades, we needed to find support and connection to one another. As we grew, we also recognized that we needed to help more women access the trades. These were good jobs. And just to give you a sense, when I started in the industry, I was making $11.29 an hour. So people entering my trade right now start at about $25 an hour. So you can see there's no wage stagnation in the construction industry. And people who are journey level make about $50 an hour. So Chicago Women in Trades grew to help other women enter the trades through pre-apprenticeship training. Also have done a lot of policy work to promote opportunities. And lately we've been trying to help other programs and other areas replicate the best practices that we know have worked. And to do that, we've set up the National Center for Women's Equity in Apprenticeship and Employment and provide technical assistance across the country with partners across the country, many of whom are here today.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Huell. I'm the Executive Director of the Minuteman Technical Institute in Lexington, Massachusetts. We are located directly across the street from the historical Minuteman National Historical Park, so that's kind of fun to drive through every day on the way to work. Minuteman Technical Institute is a post-secondary career and tech ed program. We are fairly new, having revived from some years of not offering programs for post-secondary students. We are now an evening program which expands our superintendent's vision of a fully utilized campus within the community. And we have 6 training programs: advanced manufacturing, automotive technology, cosmetology, culinary arts, electricity, and metal fabrication and joining. And I'm looking very much forward to speaking with you about our programs and our students and how it relates to the world of work.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sierra Mitchell, and I'm honored to be here today. I am a division chief at the Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship here in the Francis Perkins building. And in my division, we oversee our business engagement and marketing portfolios, as well as performance, IT systems, and the implementation of the new industry recognized apprenticeship program. So happy to talk about apprenticeship and be on stage along with all of these excellent and amazing panelists.
As you can see, we have a great group of panelists up here today. And just to kind of a little bit more about the Women's Bureau and kind of our role in women in apprenticeships, I actually yesterday had the distinct pleasure of actually being in Boston with some of Nancy's team at Mass Girls in Trades. There was 500 high school apprentices celebrating National Apprenticeship Week and kind of meeting with construction companies, all kinds of employers, kind of seeing where their apprenticeships can apply to their future. And as part of our discussion yesterday with them, and I think you've heard a little bit today from our director, Dr. Lori Todd Smith, you know, there's a growing skills gap based on the job numbers. We have 7.4 million job openings before us, and the unemployment rate for women is the lowest it's been since 1953, and that's only going to decrease even more with the Gen Y and Gen Zers entering the workforce, as long as they are skilled. And so I think there is an incredible opportunity for women who are entering the workforce right now to help solve that skills gap issue. But it's making sure that we have them ready and have them have the confidence to fill those positions with the skills that are needed. And I think we're off to a good start with the folks that we have up here. From a Women's Bureau perspective, you know, one of the areas we work on is women in apprenticeships, and I know that we've worked with several of you here today, and even in the audience, we have our Women Apprentice in Non-Traditional Occupations Grant Program, which we continue to see increasing in funding for. And so this is a particular area of interest for us, and I think, you know, the more we can identify promising practices and the more funding we can get to help kind of advance these efforts, the better shape we'll be. Tracy and Chris, Nancy and Lauren, I know that you have been involved directly or indirectly with apprenticeship programs and have served models and other programs nationwide. Tracy, I'm going to start with you. I know your career prescription success program was piloted in Detroit in 2005 and then later replicated in other cities. My question's sort of two-part. Can you tell us what happened in Detroit that just, kind of describe further how CVS committed to doubling the number of career tracks in retail pharmacy and management over the next couple of years and the successes, like why Detroit and how did it work?
Excellent. Well, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Back in 2005, under President George W. Bush and his high growth training job initiative, CVS Health was awarded a $1.7 million healthcare grant. And what we did with that money was we piloted our very first Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program in pharmacy, in large part not because it was only the high growth job initiative, but CVS Health recognized that we had a nationwide shortfall in pharmacy technician. And so we had an opportunity to build a robust program, which we did in Detroit. And in order for that program to be successful, we wanted to make sure that we developed a multi-pronged career path strategy. So our first order of business was really to create some awareness in the Detroit community about pharmacy and the careers in pharmacy. Secondly, we did a targeted approach with recruitment, and we focused on areas in Detroit that had high unemployment. We worked very closely with faith-based and community organizations that provided not only pre-employment training, but also they provided post-placement retention support, which is very important. And our partners really served as that entry point into our program. So we had a great outcome in Detroit. As you mentioned, we replicated it in 4 other cities. And I'd like to share, because we are focused on women, I'd like to share just a very quick story, if I may.
Please.
So not long after the implementation of our registered apprenticeship program, we had not only a number of successful apprentices emerge, but I want to talk about Teresa. Teresa is today, 14 years later, or 13 years later, I should say, she is still one of our colleagues. But she learned about our program through one of our community partners, Goodwill Industries. She is the mother of 2 then young sons, and she was looking for a challenging career that fulfilled her. She wanted an occupation in a new field with some advancement opportunities. And she entered our program. She excelled as a pharmacy technician. And after time, she decided that she wanted to take a management track. So with our management track program, our apprenticeship management track program, she excelled in that space, and today she is now running one of our high volume stores in Highland Park, Illinois. So I think to answer your question, one of the promising practices for us is for women, it increased our employee diversity, 80% female, 40% ethnic and racial diversity. So one last thing I'd like to share with you is that, with our success in Detroit, we rebranded the CAPS program and we named our apprenticeship CVS Health National Apprenticeship Program. Part 2 of your question about our ongoing commitment. So in our ongoing commitment, we did set a goal in 2017 to double the number of our apprentices from 5,000 to 5,000 by 2022. We've not only doubled that number, we exceeded. We're sitting currently at a little over 8,000. We expanded our apprenticeship program to 19 states, and we have 4 occupations.
Thank you, Tracy. And if I could follow up, I've actually had the pleasure of working with some of Tracy's team and talking with them on some of these, especially in the military spouse space. I know you've expanded. Joanna in New York, who's amazing. She's great, a great team member. But if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on some of your promising practices, are there some really key components from your perspective? I know you talked about faith-based, organizations that you've partnered with, but when you think about your women in apprentice programs, are there some key components that you just couldn't live without, do you think?
That's a good question. I think the occupations that we have in apprenticeship today, they're natural. Women naturally gravitate to those occupations. So we have pharmacy technicians, we have the management track. So that's very appealing to women. We offer flexible schedules.
That's key.
Oftentimes, women are the primary caretakers of not only children but members of their families. So our apprenticeship, not only the occupations, but our model seems to be a winning recipe to not only attract women, but to retain women.
And that's something I think we've been hearing over and over again at the Women's Bureau is that there are these unintended pillars of bias in the workplace, and their time and technology and education, and what we're finding out generationally is that having that flexibility is really important. And so I think that is definitely a key component in helping to balance your work-life commitments. So thank you, thank you, Tracy. Lauren, I want to kind of bring you into the conversation. I know you have more than 30 years of experience working with women in the trades, and can I ask you, what positive changes have you witnessed over the years, and are there still areas that you think really need some attention? And I know you're going to have some thoughts on this one because you have seen a lot and know how we can make some really great improvements. So
it's really exciting to be up here and be able to start on it's really exciting to be up here and be able to start on a really positive note about the progress we've made for women in the trades. And that is evidenced by a couple of things that I'm going to point to. One is the numbers are increasing. And you're not going to think these are huge numbers, but when I started in the trades, we were about 0.001% of the trades. As of 2018, women are 3.4% of participating in the trades. So that's, more than tripling, more than quadrupling, I think, if my math is right. But just in the last 3 years, we've seen that number increase from 2.7%. So we are moving forward in a way that we haven't moved as fast for many, many years. The other data point that I want to share is that women's growth within the overall industry is rising by 18%. And that's compared to overall growth of workers in the industry of 3%. So women's participation is rising. The other thing I want to point to is an amazing new attention to pregnancy accommodation and maternity leave for apprentices and journey workers in the construction trades. 3 national apprenticeship programs and unions and their management associations have adopted policies to support women who are pregnant to be able to take leave that does not limit their ability to maintain their hours, their health benefits. This is especially important in apprenticeship, where if you are not steadily working or getting X number of hours per year, you can be held back in your apprenticeship or not even be able to complete it. One of our partners who's done some exceptional work around this is in the room today, and Leah Rambo is the director of the New York City Sheetmetal Workers Apprenticeship Program from Local 28, and she has adopted this policy. She has also increased the numbers of women in her program by up to about 17%. So these achievements really reflect a number of things. Attention, women speaking out and organizing. The pregnancy accommodation policy that the ironworkers adopted was because a woman had the courage to tell her story about tragically losing her child miscarrying while working through her 8.5 months. And tradeswomen came together because of a conference, and they caucused, and they found support together to seek a solution and put pressure. And that pressure resonated. So now they have one groundbreaking policy, better than Google or Facebook, we've heard. Other programs are reaching double digits. In Massachusetts, we are seeing women's rise to apprenticeship, and it's now 9.2% of apprenticeship there. And that has dramatically, risen just in the last couple of years. We see double digits in apprenticeship programs in the Northwest, in Oregon and Washington, as well as California and in New York City. So I'm really happy to report those kinds of changes. And I'm very excited to report that we are releasing 2 studies that document these 2 trends. And they are available on the back, on the resource table back there. And today is their first release, so they've been embargoed till today, so you are the first to get these copies, and I hope you will. So at the same time, though, I have to tell you that some of the same conditions that challenged me in 1980 and all the way through my career still plague women in the trades. And because our numbers are so low, we still face many times isolation on the job. But one of the biggest challenges is not getting good training and getting assigned to menial jobs like sweeping or just collecting tools or sorting materials or painting machine rooms, which I did for about 6 months, not learning how to fix an elevator or build an elevator during that time. The other biggest challenge is getting consistent work. So the wages may be great, but if you are not working a full year, those wages not only don't benefit you, but you lose hours for your health insurance, towards your health insurance, and you lose pension hours as well. So we really do have to address those kinds of challenges. And I think the other one that still persists, and we have had a lot more attention about globally, is a hostile workplace, and a workplace that still sees women as people that can be harassed and pushed out of the industry in both subtle ways and sometimes still very overt ways. And so there's implicit bias and there is direct discrimination. And for women to have to face this on their own, it's particularly hard to stay in the industry. And that's why the other thing that's growing is tradeswomen's organizations around the country. You mentioned the Mississippi program. Anne is here from that program. Our colleagues from New York, non-traditional employment for women, are also in the room, as is our colleague from the city of DC, the AFL-CIO's Women in Construction program. And I may have other colleagues, and I also want to specifically mention our partner, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, which is helping us document these trends. And thank you, Ariane, who is there and the author of these reports.
Well, Lauren, you have done amazing work in this space over the years, and I know there's a lot that we can learn, or have learned actually, from your program and the other programs that you had mentioned. And I think, one of the top calls we actually do get at the Women's Bureau is pregnancy discrimination. And so, thanks to some of the work that you have done in your space has, really helped drive the conversation, and, appreciate you bringing your report and announcing it here today. I think that's really important. So please make sure that you do get copies of that. But I think the examples that you have provided in your apprentice programs are things that can be really translated across the workplace for women. And one of the things that we talk about at least I have been talking about with the young women coming up into the workforce is, there's an evolution of women really, it's an evolution of women really entering this workplace. And we have the opportunity to really drive change to make the workplace work for females. And I think part of that is having the ability to make the ask, ask for what we need. If you don't ask, you may not get it, or you can at least start the conversation. And that's sort of the crux, the bread and butter of the Women's Bureau is convening the conversation, which is what we're doing here today. And thanks to you for the conversations that we've been able to have to keep things going. So I appreciate your thoughts there. So Nancy, we're gonna pull you in here now from the sort of career and technical side of things. I had the pleasure of meeting Nancy, I think it was in July of...
I say June.
July of this summer, and we were in Boston and had a roundtable talking about women apprenticeships or just women in the workplace in general. And we immediately connected on a number of things, in particular women in non-traditional occupations, which actually took me to Boston yesterday and kind of has maintained the relationship with Nancy with Minuteman, and they're doing amazing things at Minuteman Vocational and Technical School. And I know that you mostly provide the programming that prepares for the women and apprentice opportunities. Can you talk a little bit how career and technical support for girls and women in gaining access to apprentice programs?
Yes, thank you. The other person that was with us in Boston, June or July, was Marianne Ham, who was my colleague at the Minuteman Regional Technical School District. And Marianne, Mrs. Ham, did the planning and the coordinating and the yeoman's task of pulling yesterday's workshop together, which, as was mentioned, was 500 young women, a number of teachers, and at least 16 trade and labor organizations that were there to support the young women who attended. So I'm sorry to have missed it. I'm sure it was a wonderful event.
It was.
So now we get to talk about what I really love, which is career and technical education. And one of the things that we as a panel spoke of on a number of conference calls was, from my perspective or the career and tech ed perspective, where can this start for young women? And it really can start in a number of places. As always, a lot of organic conversations start in the home, with families, with parents, with guardians. Who do they know? Who are their friends? What do their friends do for work? And that's where it can start. In my opinion and in my experience, where it kind of gets clogged up is at the transition from middle school to high school, when students have the opportunity to perhaps choose a traditional academic path or maybe a non-traditional for their family, for their gender, for their culture, career and tech ed path. I do think we have to get around the barrier that you must transition into a four-year college, and then you will be able to carry on with life. There are many other things that we can do. And, from my personal experience, I grew up in New York State. We had this system which is called BOCES, where you do half a day in your high school and then half a day at the Career and Tech Center. And I requested of my mother that I be allowed to go to BOCES to do cosmetology, and I got a hard no. That was the end of that discussion. Fast forward some years, and our oldest daughter wanted to pursue a career in welding, and we were great with that, but people wrung their hands when we told them that she was going to go to a technical high school. So I think, that's where it starts, is just having that conversation and bringing awareness to the fact that career and technical education opens so many doors. They can go to a four-year college after. They can go to a two-year college after. They can go into an apprenticeship training program. They can go directly into the workforce. And economically, if we talk about enhanced economic opportunity for students, if you look at longitudinal studies of the economic power or earning potential of a student over the course of time, that student with a good career tech ed pathway and good career tech ed training can make more than almost all degreed professionals, except for those degreed professionals, lawyers, doctors, and things of that nature. So I don't know if I'm answering the question. I kind of got off on my soapbox a little bit. But I really think that offering students the opportunity, exposure, the new Perkins 5 legislation kind of pushes that request for exposure down into the primary grades, which I think is great, and it's probably already being done in many schools and communities in many different ways. But let's kind of expand that and make that awareness available to all students, that these opportunities are available. I have students in my post-secondary program who are fresh from high school, who are taking a gap year, who are taking leave from their 4-year program because they found that it wasn't the best fit for them. And I also have folks coming back for retraining into a career area that they have always been interested in, but were never able to access. So take advantage of the career tech offerings in your state or your Commonwealth. Investigate your departments of education, your departments of labor. They will have some really great pathways and jumping off points for students to begin their exploration of this fascinating field.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Nancy. And I think just to kind of a couple things here that came in with some of the panelists to this point before we transition to Chris here is, we talked about the flexibility component. We talked about sort of awareness around apprenticeship programs and how they're not, you don't just align them with the 2-year degree. They can also be aligned with the 4-year degrees. They make a 4-year degree recipients very marketable, as well as the career and technical degree. And to that point, people who complete apprentice programs start at almost $70,000 and make almost $300,000 over their careers. And I think that's such an amazing opportunity with women entering the work, at the rapid rate that women should and could be entering the workforce. We really need to build awareness around apprenticeship programs and what the opportunity it is that it presents. I mean, it really is a pathway to the American dream. It's a great way to be able, it gives women the flexibility at any point in their lifetime to upskill a career, change a career path, to balance, your work-life obligations. And I think there's, a lot going on here that we're already hearing some things between the flexibility and the ability to change and line things up with different education programs that are really key here. And so we're going to move over here to Chris, who kind of gives another interesting perspective from a software perspective, Tectonic. You actually raised $2 million to help start this program. Is that correct?
Yes. Our initial VC funding was $2 million in April of last year, and we just closed a round B of $6 million.
That's amazing. Congratulations. That's really great. Let's give him a round of applause. That's awesome. Way to go. But I think what's even more important is you really brought women into the fold, into your program. I think 30% of women are part of the program, and you have a lot of representation from underrepresented communities. And so, could you tell us a little bit about your Tectonic, your software program, and the apprentice program yourself?
Yes, thank you. So again, Tectonic, we're a custom software development company, which means we write custom software for our clients. We don't produce our own products. And when our CEO, Heather Trenzio, initially found the company, the model was to sell the projects primarily within Colorado or the United States, and then take the development effort to Eastern Europe. And that was driven, the offshore model from cost, availability of resources to drive the company. And after 10 years of using offshore resources, even though it was the same team, and Heather would travel to Eastern Europe, the team would come to Colorado, it just wasn't easy. The time difference, the language difference, the cultural differences. So she thought, it's time to bring the development team home to Boulder, Colorado. Well, this was 2014-ish, and when she started looking at the availability of skilled talent and the cost of skilled talent, you know, is there another way to do this? And looking back at the way she started in tech, the way I started in tech, I went to college, but really gained that experience, that hockey stick of knowledge, you know, through workplace learning. And Heather's vision was, well, what if we hire 1 or 2 senior level developers to work on our team, and then bring in individuals who want to get into tech but haven't had an on-ramp into tech, either because they didn't go to college, they weren't exposed to these kind of jobs. Let's bring them in, let's give them some training, and then let's grow them and mentor them under the senior development to be the kind of software developers that the company wanted. And that was the catalyst for bringing in junior talent. They called it an apprenticeship program. Even though it was an apprenticeship program, the Boulder workforce provided OJT dollars to ramp these individuals up. And someone at the Boulder workforce said, you know, Heather, you really should create an apprenticeship. You know, wait, an apprenticeship for software developers? You know, same thing as when I learned about the company 3 years ago. Wait, apprenticeships don't exist for white-collar jobs. And so the company went through the process. It took about 18 months going back and forth to create a competency-based software developer apprenticeship. We're the first one in the state. We believe one of the first ones in the country to create a competency-based software developer apprenticeship. So the true DOL registered apprenticeship was started in late 2016, which is when I joined to really help drive this apprenticeship, the growth of the company through apprenticeship. And, you know, we were pioneers not only in, you know, how do we make this apprenticeship work? How do we find people? How do we vet people? And we learned by doing, and it has really just accelerated. And in terms of underserved population, you know, of women, of individuals of color, of vets getting into software development, that was part of what Heather wanted to do also, is to create that on-ramp that didn't exist, to expose those populations to careers in software development. You don't have to go to college and bring them into the fold. So that was part of the mission. And what really helped bring those individuals in through the apprenticeship is that we removed all barriers to entry of the apprenticeship. You didn't have to have a college degree. You didn't have to have any previous experience. There was no cost to get into the program. You got paid while you were in the program. So if you look at individuals who've gone to boot camps or other technical schools, you're writing a check for $15,000 to $25,000. They're full-time. Well, how do you earn a living? Well, then you have to work at night. Well, with our apprenticeship, which is a paid apprenticeship, our apprentices get paid from the first hour of training. They're in training for 14 weeks of classroom instruction full-time with our instructional team. And from the first hour they're in training, we're preparing them to be software developers, not just giving them the technical skills, but giving them the knowledge, the soft skills to work in the development environment. So as they complete the class, then they move on to our development floor. That's where they get that workplace, that experiential learning, and that's where we really see people take off. So we've opened the doors, opened the opportunities to individuals who thought they wouldn't have a way to get into software development, and it really has just helped explode our company. There was approximately 10 of us in January of 18, and we're over 100 people right now, with the majority of them coming through our apprenticeship program. As I mentioned earlier, 31% of our apprentices are women, compared to the national average of about 7%. 26% of our apprentices are individuals of color, and national average is about 10%. Our veteran population is 14% of our apprentices are vets. So you know, not only the opportunity for individuals to get into tech, we call them diamonds in the rough. You know, it's really helped our company and our clients in terms of solving problems, because you know, represented here, tech is primarily white males. So when you bring in women, when you bring in individuals of diversity, everybody's not looking through the same lens, middle-class lens, college lens that they grew up. And it's really been very exciting to see the creative problem solving, not only for Tectonic, but for our clients. So through the apprenticeship, we're growing our company. We're writing software for our clients. And one of the models that we have is if that apprentices are on a project, a software development project, and they bill about 1,000 hours, our clients have the right, the ability to hire those apprentices for free. So in a market that is screaming for talent and doesn't have enough talent, we're creating the talent. We're creating that talent for our company, and we're creating that talent for our clients. And it's very, very exciting. And when we talk to potential clients about diversity and creating diversity within software development, you know, their interest in what we're doing goes even higher.
No, that's awesome. And I think, you know, I actually came from pretty male-dominated industries as well. I was in manufacturing and oil and gas, and I think there's many apprentice programs in that space as well. And I think I was doing some reading. I think 26% of the software industry is female. It's a very small number, better than some other industries. But I think one of the things that you're doing that's amazing is apprenticeships are a way to just sort of level the playing field. It doesn't, regardless of socioeconomic background, gender, race. I mean, you can really just jump in and go.
Yeah,
and
it's a skill-based job.
Yeah.
And it really is. And when we're talking to our clients, and you know, how do you find the diversity? How do you find these individuals to train? It's interesting, when I joined the company in November 2016, there was 8 of us working in a dumpy little basement. You know, it was what it was. We're a small company. But because of the disruptive nature of a software developer apprenticeship, we're on the cover of the New York Times, we're in the Wall Street Journal, we're in Forbes. Now, this is a company of 8 to 12 people. So that just shows you, I think, the impact of what an apprenticeship, especially in software development, can have not only on a company, but also on an industry at large.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Before we get to Sierra, I just want to do a quick sort of wrap up here on the questions that we were asking. You know, one of the things we found at the Women's Bureau is supportive services is really critical in the space of women and apprentice programs. And maybe it doesn't touch all of you, but if there's a quick comment that you could make on the critical need of those sorts of support services for women and apprentice, that would be great. Anyone can just kind of take that one if there's anyone.
So for our industry, which includes construction, manufacturing, transportation occupations, the primary thing women need is pre-apprenticeship training. We need to build the skills to be competitive and confident candidates for the apprenticeship programs. And our trainings encompass physical fitness, math remediation, assertiveness, self-esteem building, but they also build a network, a support network for women, so they go into the trades, unlike I did, with a team that backs them. There's also the concretes of supportive services, and at Chicago Women in Trades last year, we spent $89,000 to support our graduates from our pre-apprenticeship program for their needs in relation to transportation, childcare, stipends, because apprenticeship was designed with an 18-year-old living at home, okay, without a family. And so you often have a little bit of an unpaid period sometimes right at the beginning. So if you don't have a way to support yourself, there's also initiation fees, application fees, the purchasing of tools, the clothing that you need to be protected in. So those supportive service dollars are huge. And that's in addition to the cost of running the pre-apprenticeship training programs. Mentorship is critical, and I think the bottom line for us is sisterhood. You know, having a place to call home, a family of tradeswomen, and that's really the kind of network that the tradeswomen's organizations around the country provide for women. And we just want to keep growing not only the pre-apprenticeship training programs, but also these support networks, the sisterhood.
Great.
I'd like to say that Minuteman Technical Institute and other institutes like that could serve as a very nice pre-apprenticeship training program. In fact, the students that we have are kind of in a quasi-apprenticeship program. They're learning under master technicians or master teachers. They have the same issues that they might face in the workplace, in the classroom. What makes us special is that we are providing, along with technical skills, we are providing some academic boosting with math boot camps. We're also providing them personal skills to be able to handle what they face in the workplace, which is sometimes mirrored in the classroom. And I think it's a nice launch pad or on-ramp, as Chris said, to the apprenticeship programs. So we're very much looking forward to partnering with different programs from our perspective.
Great. And did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly say that our department, Workforce Initiatives, is designed to bring individuals into our organization through program development, like our National Apprenticeship Program. So typically, we're working in collaboration with, our community partners whose resources bring an opportunity to support the trainee with childcare, with transportation, with housing in some instances, and other life issues that may get in the way of their success. So making sure that we have a network of resources, we have supportive services in terms of staff to mentor our apprentices while they're either a pre-apprentice or an apprentice. That's key for the success of individuals in our apprenticeship program.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to bring Sarah into the mix here from the Department of Labor. She is a wealth of knowledge for us here at the Department of Labor, having been here for almost a decade, I think. And I want to ask you, what kind of trends are you seeing in this space? Any kind of stats, trends, kind of what's happening in the apprenticeship space?
Thank you. Well, I have to tell you, a lot is happening in the apprenticeship space. We are DOL's #1 priority right now. And I have been here over 10 years with the Office of Apprenticeship for 5 years. And I'm honored to say that I assisted with the launch of National Apprenticeship Week 5 years ago and led National Apprenticeship Week over the past 3 years. So I've seen firsthand the growth, not only in National Apprenticeship Week events overall, but in women-specific and focused events. And it's been incredible to watch and to witness, from proclamations declaring National Women in Apprenticeship Day across the country to large events held by incredible partners who are probably in this room, such as the Policy Group on Tradeswomen Issues, the Northeast Center for Tradeswomen Equity, Women's Bureau, of course, and Chicago Women in Trades. And Chicago Women in Trades is not only just a great partner, but they're also one of our national equity intermediary contractors. And I don't know if Lauren remembers this, but a few years ago we were talking about, what the key is to really moving the needle when it comes to increasing the number of women apprentices. And Lauren mentioned it has to be purposeful. And I have to tell you, as I'm looking at trends and things like that and talking to sponsors and educators and others about how to really, increase the number of women apprentices, I've seen that firsthand myself, that it has to be intentional and purposeful. And I remember in 2017, I've seen a lot of events across the country over the past few years, but one that always comes to mind is when Massachusetts launched a statewide campaign in 2017. It was the Build a Life That Works campaign, and they had billboards all over the state. And I didn't get a chance to actually see one in person, but I just saw pictures and was blown away. And it left a lasting impression on me, and I'm sure on so many others, to see billboards like that and to see a whole state come together. And so, it just goes to show that when sponsors put their mind to something and partner with the right people to, increase women in apprenticeship or increase or diversify in other ways, it can definitely happen. Another key to change is also through purposeful investments and partnerships, and that's what we've done with the Department of Labor. When you look at our growth in women apprenticeship over the past 10 years, you can definitely see significant growth. But if you look at the past 5 years, the increase is remarkably different. It's amazing. And I'm not surprised because we've invested over $700 million over the past 5 years. And in diversifying apprenticeship into new industries and new occupations. And if you look at our numbers, you can see the fruits of those investments. For example, over the past 5 years alone, the number of female apprentices in the manufacturing, IT, and arts and entertainment industries has doubled. The numbers have tripled in construction, public administration, and retail sectors. And if you look at the numbers and the growth of apprenticeship in the hospitality, financial services, and education sectors, it's off the charts, the growth from 5 years ago to today. So I just want to say that as far as trends, the outlook is promising, and I'm positive and confident that if we continue to invest in public-private partnerships and in states, as we've done, and in these intermediary industry and equity intermediary contracts, I'm sure that the numbers of women in apprenticeship will continue to soar.
Thank you, Sarah. And I need to get your numbers. I want some of that data. So, okay, we're going to move really quickly. I'm going to do like 2 rounds of sort of round robin, real quick, 2 minutes. We'll do a question, go right down the line, if you will. And then we'll do another sort of quick round robin, if you will, our speed dating sessions. So from all the panelists here, and at least, you know, Sierra, we'll bring you back in here in the mix. And what we'd like to know is, how are your partnerships formed? What are the sources of funding that support your operation? And are there direct costs to your participants? And can they offset them? Let's start with you, Tracy, and let's just go right down the line, maybe a minute or 2.
Okay, sounds good. So yes, it is very important. We have very important partnerships with organizations that train and provide us with quality candidates that we want to hire and bring into our organization. So that allows us to maximize our outcomes. So that's one. Through our partnerships, there's a source of funding at the federal level, as well as supplemental funding from state and local workforce systems. We are currently an employer partner participating in the American Apprenticeship Initiative grant projects in the Midwest, and we collaborate very effectively with the local workforce boards and community colleges to drive those outcomes. We have a new initiative that is in New Jersey, Scaling Apprenticeship Grant. So that's new for us. We haven't registered our standards yet, but be on the lookout for those in the near future. And then some of the direct costs for the participants, namely for the pharmacy technician occupation, is the licensing fee, as well as the certification fee for the national exam. These costs could be offset by CVS Health's educational benefit in some instances. In others, our community partners offset those costs. So we try to cover direct expenses through that supplemental funding.
Great, thank you. Chris?
For Tectonic to grow the way it did, we would not be where we are today without the help of the 7 county workforces within Colorado who provide funding to our program. Primarily Boulder County, the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment has provided funding to us and exposure to our program. We received a Work Act grant a couple years ago that really allowed us to scale up our apprenticeship program. It provided dollars for equipment, for curriculum, and for training. Also, we're working with the community college system in Colorado. We were recently approved, so an apprentice who completes our program will get 41 college credits transferable within the community college system. Foundations, we have a couple foundations, even though there is no cost for our program. Workforce dollars, foundation dollars allow us to continue to grow. One foundation helps women with single parents get into tech. Another foundation helps pull individuals out of poverty to help our program. You know, as I spoke earlier, they're not a partner, but a key advocate is we get a lot of great press. If you Google Tectonic, you'll be amazed at the number of stories that come up. We were blessed to have the Department of Labor come out last year and film a video that was released during National Apprenticeship Week in 2018. And those kind of things really help drive interest to our program. And just real quick, you know, what really helps our program go is internally just the spirit of mentorship. Every employee is there to help grow their other employees.
Laura?
So for Chicago Women in Trades in our National Center, I really think there are a couple strains of partnership. So our primary one right now that's allowing us to replicate this work and provide the technical assistance across the country is our support from the Office of Apprenticeship as a recipient of an equity and inclusion contract to provide technical assistance to the apprenticeship community. And our second national partner is the Women's Bureau. Through our grant from the Women in Apprenticeable and Non-Traditional Occupations Act. And both of those are fundamental to both growing the technical assistance as well as some of the direct services. Much of the work that you both talked about in Massachusetts, the girls, Women in Trades Girls Fair, or the Fair for Girls, is supported by both the Women's Bureau grant and the Office of Apprenticeship contract. So those investments make a huge difference. We sometimes get those kinds of investments at the state and local level from our workforce department, very rarely from our career and technical system. And we've actually lost some ground within the Department of Education in terms of support for gender equity initiatives over the years. The other primary partnerships that many of us are developing are with our contractors community. And for example, the intentionality that Sierra talked about is really evident in Massachusetts, and the two partners you named there have been instrumental in getting the University of Massachusetts building system and the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to ensure that there are high goals for women's participation and strong equity initiatives on site. And as a result, they've had over 17% female participation on some of their projects. In Chicago, the Obama Presidential Center is investing in our initiatives, both in our pre-apprenticeship training and our technical assistance, as is our airport system and our public transit system. So those investments are really critical. We would love to have more support at the national level from our industry partners. Locally, we get a lot of support from our labor unions as well, but that could be replicated on a national level. We've also lost some of the resources that came out of the Department of Transportation. For example, when you build federal highways, there used to be set-asides to provide supportive services and on-the-job training. So all of that is important to us as organizations. We charge nothing to our program participants. In fact, we try to provide resources. What I mentioned, that $89,000 came from the United Way to provide those supportive services. So we're all looking at different, unique ways to collaborate.
Yes, and students who are interested in Minuteman Technical Institute, if they meet the eligibility guidelines, they are able to qualify for WIOA funds through the youth programs, and they may also be able to access other training funds through their local workforce development board. And we are fortunate enough to have 3 workforce development boards that we are assigned to by virtue of town boundaries. So we get much support from them, which has been a great partnership for us.
Great. So I want to make sure before we get into Q&A, just give Sierra an opportunity to maybe talk about if there are any sort of resources available through apprenticeship.gov, and then we'll get right into Q&A. So.
Sure, thank you. Yes, we have, I don't know if anyone has been able to go to apprenticeship.gov, but it is our digital one-stop shop for all things apprenticeship. Earlier, the secretary mentioned the task force that was put together under the executive order to help us figure out how we can expand apprenticeship. And one of those recommendations was to have a one-stop shop so that those interested in apprenticeship can easily find opportunities and and access information, and that's what we did. We launched Apprenticeship.gov, and one of the key features on there is a national job finder, apprenticeship job finder. The very first job finder that allows users to go on there and find open apprenticeship jobs in their area. You can search by industry keyword or your specific area. The job finder also, we also recently launched a partner finder. So if you aren't interested in just finding open apprenticeship jobs, all registered apprenticeship sponsors can be found on this job finder, including the related training providers in the area. So if you want to know all of the sponsors in a certain industry or all of the sponsors in your area or their training providers, or to find an apprenticeship consultant in your area if you have questions or want to start a program, the apprenticeship job or partner finder, I should say, is available to help you. You can also find industry and equity contractors in your area if you want to help diversify into a new industry or to increase access to apprenticeship to underrecognized or represented populations. So please check out the Partner Finder. In addition to resources for career seekers, the apprenticeship.gov website also has resources for employers to start a program. It also includes an industry landing page where there's industry-specific information for telecommunications, transportation, IT, and cybersecurity, including fact sheets, data, and other information. And lastly, there's a page for educators. And that page includes information such as a youth guide, case studies, and actual examples of how high school students are working on apprenticeship, post-secondary students. And recently, we just launched some new Scholastic materials through a partnership with Scholastic for teachers, parents, and students. And a lot of these resources are actually at our booth in the back to the right, as well as a laptop where you can walk through the apprenticeship.gov system. So I hope you get a chance to check it out.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to the panelists. We're going to jump right into Q&A. We went just a little bit longer, but I think we were having some really good substantive conversation up here and that you were learning. We'll probably take maybe 3 or so questions, and then if there's anything, we do have our networking session that will be later, and our panelists will be available. So I want to throw out there, anyone want to ask a question? Okay, we have one over here. And we have staff with microphones that will come to you. If you could say your name, organization, and then ask your question.
Hi, I'm Christina Brooks with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, and I would love to hear any tips or best practices you have for establishing and nurturing youth apprenticeships, especially those that are targeting young girls.
Who wants to take that question? We'll do, anyone? Answer.
Thank you for your question. There has been such an increase in youth apprenticeship programs lately, and I'm so happy to see that. I'm passionate about youth apprenticeship and just youth work experience in general. So just want to let everyone know, too, that we have staff located across the country, and their main job is to help people start programs, and we're also available to help fund programs, expand programs, all types of programs, including youth programs. And so I highly recommend anyone who's interested in starting a program to go to apprenticeship.gov. You can also email us at apprenticeship@dol.gov. But we have staff at the national level, regional, state, and local levels. And again, our whole job is to help start programs. We also just invested in youth intermediary contracts to help incentivize and fund some new youth apprenticeship programs. And as I mentioned before, we're working with Scholastic and other CTSOs and American School Superintendents Associations and others, Skills USA, and the Technology Student Association to expand and promote youth apprenticeships. So there's a lot of work being done, and I'd love to talk to you more about some of that during the networking session later today.
In Colorado, there's a group called CareerWise, and they're in year 3 of launching apprenticeships within high schools. So take a look for CareerWise in Colorado. It could be some great information for you.
Great, thank you.
I can't speak directly to formal youth apprenticeships. But at Chicago Women in Trades, for a number of years, we offered a Tradeswomen of Tomorrow program that was embedded in the career and technical education system, where we brought girls together on field trips to different apprenticeship programs, support group, and some of the mirroring of the kinds of pre-apprenticeship programs we did. There also used to be in the schools articulation agreements, so you could do 2 years of your apprenticeship within a career and tech program, and then go right into an apprenticeship program already having credit for 2 years. And I think exploring that, partnerships with the Department of Education's Office of Career and Tech and the Office of Apprenticeship would be really important next step.
We have a question right here up front.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Tekle Ngule. I'm from DC, originally from Africa. I need help because I have a patient with R entitlement. So I received my master's degree in information system management. I create local news for African diaspora here. And I'm struggling to find out help about the printing and financement and everything. So I go to many events, but nobody speaks nothing about entertainment media or art. I don't know if somebody here can help me to find out tips where I can get help, because we have millions of people following us, but we lack of financial support. Thank you.
I don't know, Sarah, I don't know if you might be able to help, but I think if you go to apprenticeship.gov, that's probably your best resource for finding out opportunities around that, around specific issues, or even funding or grant programs around that. And then I know there will be probably some best practice models that will be coming out, but specifically for you, I think that's probably your best resource, apprenticeship.gov, if you agree, Sarah.
I agree. I think apprenticeship.gov is a great resource. Again, our staff, and there's a contact us form, and on the Partner Finder, you can also find staff in your area. I know you said you were in DC, so we can connect you with the DC point of contact as well. We also, on our DOL.gov/apprenticeship page, our main DOL apprenticeship page, we have an investments page. As I mentioned, we have invested over $700 million over the past 5 years. And so you can go on that page and look for upcoming grants and contracts and other investments as well.
Okay. We'll take one more question if there is one. Okay, I think we have one back here.
Hi, my name is Lakia Graham. I'm with the Virginia Employment Commission Jobs for Veterans State Grant. My question for the panel is, how are you guys and ladies incorporating women veterans and also women transition and service members into your apprenticeship programs?
We actively are looking for vets to join our program. One of the benefits that we have, if a veteran has post 9/11 GI Bill benefits available, they can use their housing stipend within our program. We work with the local workforce team members who focus in on veterans to bring them into our program, to expose them to careers in tech. Also, one of the things that, excuse me, we're working in conjunction with Microsoft Philanthropy, the Texas Workforce, and Tectonic, and we're launching a pilot program next year to train 15 active military spouses in software development from Fort Bliss. So again, we found that there's a large veteran government-driven and also private to help vets, and those are the resources that we reach out to and reach out to us.
Great. So I think if it's okay, we're going to wrap up here for today. As you can see, we could go on and on with the conversation, but I think what we'll do is take a few-minute break here, and we'll come back probably about 8 to 10 minutes. As you can see, we have a distinguished group. Thank you so much for being here today, and I know there's probably a wealth of questions that you could still ask, and please save those for the networking session. For now, we'll take a break, and this will also conclude our live stream of the program today. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Please welcome back to the stage Women's Bureau Director, Dr. Lori Todd Smith.
Hello again. Thank you so much. that was a very enlightening session, so I appreciate all that you did. I want to introduce one more person who's going to speak today. The Women's Bureau works very closely with the Office of Employment and Training Administration, otherwise known as ETA. And they're a great partner with us on many programs, including our Women in Apprenticeship and Non-Traditional Occupations grants. So I wanted to be sure to give John Palish, our Assistant Secretary for Employment and Training, an opportunity to give a few remarks. So please welcome John Palish.
Thank you for the introduction, Lori. It's great to be here today to celebrate National Apprenticeship Week with all of you, and especially recognizing women in apprenticeships. As we've heard and discussed throughout the day, National Apprenticeship Week shines a spotlight on the opportunities apprenticeships offer to our workers, families, and our communities. This week we celebrate with business leaders, educators, state and local governments, and others across the nation to promote the benefits apprenticeships have in our workplaces and in our communities. ETA and the Women's Bureau, as Lori mentioned, have a strong history of working together to help advance women in the workforce. Together, we are committed to helping expand access to apprenticeship for all women. This year, the Women's Bureau awarded $1.5 million to increase apprenticeships and expand access to apprenticeships in non-traditional occupations, $2.5 million to help women impacted by the opioid crisis re-enter the workforce. ETA has contributed $100 million to attempt to close the skill gap that you heard a little bit about earlier today, and $183 million to try to expand apprenticeships in non-traditional occupations and underrepresented populations. But the thing that I take away from today is the fact that you all are the front lines. DOL, Women's Bureau, ETA, we serve as the facilitators, the conveners, sometimes the funders, but you are the organizations who are interacting with the customers. So without you and without your connection to the community and the work that you do, the engagement, the outreach, and the efforts that you put forward, quite frankly, we'd just be sitting here in DC setting policy. So I thank you all for your commitment to what we're trying to help facilitate across the country. Deputy Secretary Pizzella mentioned earlier the forgotten men and women. Although we have historically low unemployment, the thing that keeps me up at night are the 34 million forgotten men and women who are not part of the workforce. And everything we do is geared towards trying to bring those individuals back into the workforce, whether that's women in apprenticeship, whether that's folks dealing with opioid recovery. I was at a prison last week in Pennsylvania talking to 350 prisoners about a reentry program and how we can help get them back to work. So it is not lost on me that you and organizations like you are the ones who take our vision and actually implement it. You're the ones engaged with the customers. You're the ones working with them, helping remove their barriers and getting them back into the workforce. So I very much appreciate that. I very much appreciate your commitment today. I look forward to reading some of the idea storms and some of the things that we could probably do better on our end, because we certainly don't have all of the answers. So I thank Dr. Todd Smith for inviting me today. I thank the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary, and most importantly, I thank all of you for making the effort to come, to share your ideas, share your feedback, in the hopes that we can all do better as a workforce community. So thank you very much.
Okay, so we're coming to the end. On behalf of the Women's Bureau, I'd like to thank you all for coming today to the National Summit on Women in Apprenticeships. There's a deep well of measurable economic value that remains untapped, and the value is our nation's female potential. The key to our future success in national competitiveness is growth, is found in unlocking that potential. So one way to do that is to make apprenticeships more available and to accessible to women, and I appreciate your invested interest in that today. I would like to thank our speakers, panelists, attendees today in person and online for attending today's summit. I'd like, actually, the staff of the Women's Bureau team to all stand. I'd like to make sure you all know how much work they put into this event, so please give them a round of applause. It's so comforting in starting a new job to know you already have an amazing team. So thank you. That was an excellent job by all. So let's take the next half hour for networking and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming.